Hello, and welcome to Symposium 365. I'm Kara Barbrick, Space Awareness Programs Manager for Space Foundation. It is my pleasure to introduce today's session, Space is Better Together, Tomorrow's Space Jobs Are Here Today. Every year, the global space ecosystem celebrates World Space Week. In coordination with the United Nations, this tradition started in 1999 and has continued to be held the week of 4 through 10 October. During this time, we honor all the contributions of space science and technology that have left a lasting impact on our world. Participants of World Space Week strive to educate, encourage, and excite people about space and how we benefit from space programs. Space Foundation is proud to present our contribution to World Space Week's theme of Women in Space. In a career field that is predominantly held by men, women have also made a significant impact in the aerospace industry. From women like Katherine Johnson of Hidden Figures fame, who paved the way as one of NASA's human computers to help calculate orbital mechanics, to scientists, engineers, and astronauts, women continue to trailblaze for future generations of female STEM leaders. Joining us today are some amazing women who are making an impact in today's space science, medical, and educational fields. Leading our discussion is Meredith Garofalo, meteorologist and space journalist for Weather Nation. As chairperson for the American Meteorological Society Station Scientist Committee, she is devoted to raising awareness of science education, especially encouraging women to pursue careers in STEM. Thank you for joining us, Meredith. The virtual floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Kara. And it is so exciting to celebrate World Space Week with everybody that's here, not just on the panel, but all of you that are watching us from home. This is going to be a very exciting panel, and I have three incredible women, talented women in the space community. And we're going to be talking about our theme, which is Space is Better Together. Tomorrow's space jobs are here today. I'm the moderator of the panel. My name is Meredith Garofalo. I am a meteorologist at Weather Nation, certified broadcast meteorologist from the American Meteorological Society. And I am also a science and space reporter. And then I do a lot of things on the side too, talking about jobs in both the STEM fields, but also now the space field, the space careers that we are seeing emerge. As we know, it's not just the STEM field that'll be moving forward into that. And so this panel is going to introduce you to three women, as I mentioned, that have those jobs. Right now, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Dorit Donoviel. She's the Executive Director for Translational Research Institute for Space Health. And she's got some remarks right now for you so you can get to meet her. Hello, Dr. Dorit.
Thank you, Meredith. It's a pleasure to be here today. What a wonderful way to start the Space Week this week with this wonderful all-women panel. It's really an honor to be here. So I wanted to just take a couple minutes in this introduction to introduce you to my institute, our institute. It belongs to all of us. So the Translational Research Institute for Space Health, it is a mouthful. We shortened it to TRISH, so now you could just call us TRISH. We are partnered very closely with the NASA Human Research Program, HRP, that's based out of Johnson Space Center here in Houston. We are a cooperative agreement based at Baylor College of Medicine in the Medical Center with consortium partners on the West Coast and East Coast, Caltech and MIT. What we do and what we're charged by NASA to accomplish is to search the world and find and fund really breakthrough capabilities to make sure that when humans explore space, they do so safely and they remain healthy. So whether they are in low Earth orbit for short duration or long duration, they're exploring the moon or even going on the way to Mars, our job is to find solutions to enable their healthcare capabilities and to keep them safe. So because today is a panel around women and the perspective of women, I wanted to just put it in perspective of the whole of human space exploration. So humans have been going to space for the last 60 years, and they've been roughly a little over 500 people who have explored space. And let's be real, most of those people have been men. Most of those people have been white men. Most of these people have been white American men. Now, very recently, over the last decade or so, NASA's really made some significant strides. And if you look at the past several astronaut classes, you'll see diversity and in terms of gender and ethnicity. And this is wonderful. And as I look across the leadership in NASA, also all the way from the very top, Pam Melroy being deputy administrator, to Johnson Space Center center director, who's a woman of color, Vanessa Weish, to the associate administrator, Kathy Leaders, and all throughout the ranks of NASA, they have been a lot of women. Now, as we're seeing now commercial spaceflight become more of a reality, where regular people are now able to access space, we're going to see a lot more non-governmental people, a lot more diversity even then. And so all those people who will be going into space will have medical conditions, pre-existing conditions, will have cancer survivors, as we saw recently with the Inspiration 4 flight. We'll have very young people going to space. We'll have very old people. I just heard that Bill Shatner is going to space. He's 90 years old. So it's really exciting because for us as an institute, our job is to make sure that we understand the full physiology of the human and how to make sure that any human, no matter what their pre-existing condition, no matter what their skin color, no matter what their gender is, they are able to explore space very safely.
Now, that was one incredible woman. And I have another one for you because we're not done just yet. Now joining us is Erin McLean. She is the Senior Design Strategist for Customer Utilization Services at Blue Origin. So, hi, Erin. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Meredith. I am so honored to be here today with such an amazing panelist of women. I am going to talk a little bit about what designers do for space, in that I'm a practicing designer in the space industry. And design for space for many years has meant many different things. People, mostly engineers, design systems, engines, entire vehicles. It's the act of deciding the form based on the functionality or the mission requirements that are needed. I come from actually the traditional field of design and engineering, specifically a subfield called human-centered design and engineering, which looks at the complex socio-technical systems that people operate within and their goals, their aspirations, needs, pain points that they have. And then with the human at the center of this perspective, I seek to provide an equitable and just solution for them to achieve their goals, solve their problems, and be empowered. So my background is not just a technical domain, but a way of solving problems and a perspective on what solutions should look like. And that is what I bring to the space industry, with a focus on human performance and experience in extreme environments. And space is an extreme environment, both living in microgravity or on other planets. There's a lot of challenges to humans achieving their goals in those situations. So I seek to help people design space futures for people living and working in space and for people working within those space systems. For the past few decades, human-centered design and the space industry have been somewhat divorced, and only in the past few years have designers made an effort to participate more, and the space industry has started to realize the value of having designers participate. And really the transformation is coming from this new space age that we have, in that we are moving away from focusing on pure survival or vehicle-focused missions and really focusing on the human experience, especially as we have tourists and people going up to inspire. And I believe that there's a film crew going up on a SpaceX flight in the near future. We are moving away from, can people functionally do their jobs, to how should people be transformed through the medium of space? And so designers are finding a bigger and bigger field to contribute to and help people focus on humans as individuals, as communities, and as systems in space.
Look at that. Another amazing woman of space. And we're not done just yet. I have one more person I'm very excited to introduce you to that will be speaking today. She has a very long title, so I'm going to give it my best shot. But now joining us is Jessica Deihl. She is the lead for industry stakeholder and international relations from the Office of Legislative and Intergovernmental Affairs with NASA. Hope I did okay, Jessica.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Well, it's always hard to go last after such a wonderful list of amazing and impressive women, but I'll give you a little bit about my background. After completing law school, I joined NASA through the Presidential Management Fellowship Program, and I worked at NASA headquarters with the Commercial Spaceflight Program as a part of the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate. And from there, I moved over to Goddard Space Flight Center, where I worked in the Office of Chief Counsel as an attorney, as a general law specialist, really all types of law, including procurement, real estate, international law, fiscal law, Space Act agreements, pretty much you name it. Moved on from there, back over to NASA headquarters, where I now work in the Office of Legislative and Intergovernmental Affairs. And as noted, I'm our lead for industry and stakeholder relations, where I work with all of our industry partners for the agency. And I'm also our liaison for congressional matters related to our Office of International and Interagency Relations. So, for example, any legislation or questions from the Hill related to our international partnerships. One of the differences that I guess I've noticed in the time that I've been working in the industry from when I first started is that when we did a women's panel, really what we were discussing was, women's sort of place in the work life, women's work-life balance, and issues such as that. Whereas panels like this today, which are so amazing and are really just highlighting the incredible work that so many of these great ladies are doing. And so it's really been a change and a really awesome one. I've also noticed that it's been a lot more common in recent times that we'll be on a technical panel, and at some point through the panel, someone will notice, hey, this is an entire panel of women, completely unplanned. They just happen to be the lead experts in their field and in what they're doing. So I think they're really exciting changes. I love the way the industry is going. I love being a part of panels like these with such wonderful and inspiring ladies. And I look forward to answering any questions about my background or anything you'd like to ask. Thanks, and back over to you.
Thank you so much. Again, we've got some incredible women on our panel, and you're going to get to learn more about them, about their jobs, their careers, their dreams, their goals. And everybody watching today, I know there's somebody out there that's going to be motivated. And so the thing to remember is the conversations that we have today are just conversations to start. We are going to continue this conversation moving forward, and we're going to continue to have conversations with each other. And we highly encourage you to reach out to us even after this panel if you have individual questions. This is the exciting part, because you can see that I have all three of those ladies joining me now here on stage. And we're going to go through some questions so you can get to know us a little bit better, but also get to know about our jobs and our passions for the space industry. And so the first question, I know it's always asked, but I think it's that easy question to kind of jump into the conversation, because there's always that why as to why we get into our careers or what got us into the space industry. And for me personally, it was doing one story on human exploration and satellites, and I was sold on turning my career into not just focusing on weather, but becoming a space journalist. And so we will start with Dorit. Can you tell me what got into this industry? And then afterwards, we'll follow with Erin and then Jessica.
A complete fluke, as the best things in life are, right? I was working for a biotech company in the Woodlands, Texas. And in 2008, they laid off the entire research workforce. The market crashed, and their investors said, we can't afford to keep paying for your research. So I was looking for a job, and I went to a breakfast meeting, and, networking. I tell everybody that's looking for positions, networking. And I went to a breakfast meeting one time, and it was something completely unrelated to what I'm doing now, but it was a science networking meeting. And I sat next to somebody, just happened to sit next to them, and that's how I ended up in the space world. So I'm a biologist by training. I love anything to do with figuring out how living things adapt to the environment, what makes us tick. I think we're amazing. And so for me, it was a no-brainer, because going into space actually challenges living things in such a unique way, and we adapt. I mean, imagine that. There was a time when we didn't even know if humans could breathe in space, or, we could swallow in space, we could sleep in space, we could everything we could do in space. And so it seems like a no-brainer now, but it's just amazing how adaptable the human body is. So for me, space is just kind of the next iteration of human biology. It's like humans 2.0 for me in space. So that's how I ended up here.
That's awesome, Dorit. Okay, Erin, now you have the floor.
Yeah, I also kind of ended up here as a fluke as well. I had no clue what I wanted to do in undergrad, and so my strategy was to take every awesome sounding class in the course catalog at the University of Washington. And I ended up in a class called Space and Space Travel that I absolutely fell in love with. And I ended up taking every single Washington NASA Space Grant Consortium class that they offered. I worked in a rockets and instrumentation lab for 5 years of undergrad. And so there I was, like, out in the Black Rock Desert, shooting off rockets off of balloons and kites. And at the same time, I was majoring in this very human-centric field, and I couldn't really marry the two together at the time. There wasn't much of a path forward for that. So I actually went into industry as a designer for several years before trying to come back to the space industry. And I did it through academia, because there aren't many formal paths for designers to participate yet. I ended up going to grad school and creating projects for myself that were human-centric, space-focused. And I was able to partner with NASA for my graduate thesis, actually, and go test it down at JSC. And that really wedged open the door. And as said earlier, networking is so important. So this was an opportunity for me to network and to meet people and figure out if people were ready to have designers participate. And so after graduation, that created an opportunity for me to join Blue Origin.
I love it. Okay, Jessica, like you said, last but certainly not least, how's your story about getting into the industry?
Well, funny enough, we seem to be part of a pattern here. I think I also was a bit of a happy accident in entering the space industry. As I sort of briefly mentioned earlier, after law school, I had received the Presidential Management Fellowship, which is shortened as PMF for anyone that might be familiar with that or interested in learning more. And as part of the fellowship, they did a career fair for us. And all of the agencies who were interested in accepting fellows were there at the career fair. And I ended up speaking to the folks at the NASA booth. I was always fascinated by space since I was a little girl. I did like an aerospace summer camp as a child. It was boys only at that time, and I really wanted to do it. And so my mother, decided there was nothing her little girl was going to be told she couldn't do. So my mother made sure they had a female counselor, and I was able to be part of that summer camp, that aerospace summer camp. It was always a passion, but I never envisioned it as a career. And so while we were at this career fair, there was a NASA booth, and I was, drawn to talking to them. And they were interested in my background in law and finance as a good fit for, at that time, the somewhat emerging commercial spaceflight program, and pulled me in to work there. And I was so excited to get a chance to be a part of NASA and the space industry, and thought, well, even if I just do this for a short period of time, this will always be a really cool part of my history and my career, and I'll do this as long as this continues to be cool and continues to be fun. And here I am almost 10 years later, and I have to say it's still just so amazing to be there. The work that we're doing is so exciting. This year particularly, we have the James Webb Space Telescope launch coming up, which will allow us to look further back in time than we've ever seen before. We have the Artemis missions that are shortly coming down the pipeline to bring the first woman and the first person of color to the moon and on into the stars. So it's just so exciting to be there. We're just doing such cool things. So
obviously, all of us are now focusing in on human exploration and space exploration. And so my next question for you ladies is, how does your job contribute to space exploration and human exploration? And we will go back and we'll start with Dorit.
Well, for me, it's a no-brainer. That's my other favorite thing. It's a no-brainer because we really are focused on making sure humans are healthy, and it's not a given. I mean, yes, I did talk about adaptation and our bodies adapt well to space, but let's face it, space is a hostile environment. It's a vacuum. There's increased radiation. There's lack of gravity. And the longer you spend in that environment, the more your body is going to deteriorate as a result of all of those things. And so living in a confined space, living in a confined space in space challenges us in terms of, food supplies, medications, the things that we have available to us. The further you move away from Earth, the more autonomous you have to be, the more you have to take care of yourself. You have communication delays. You can't rely on the ground to solve all your problems. So we have to think of ourselves as sort of pioneers, in making sure that we enable those humans to be healthy and successful wherever they are. And we haven't even touched the mental challenges of being in a confined space. I mean, most of us will attest, hey, just being stuck at home with socially distancing and not being able to go out anywhere for a year and a half drove a lot of us bonkers. And so those individuals who will live in that small space for longer and longer periods of time, they will be facing something that's never been faced before by a human. Even missions to Antarctica, et cetera, they leave after 8 months and they are able to move around a little bit more. But, so these are challenges that force us as humans to think about how are we better? How do we innovate to make ourselves better? And along the way, we are learning how to recycle water, how to recycle air, how to use everything that we use, reuse it, how to, really keep ourselves mentally resilient, how to protect ourselves from insults from the environment, which help us with insults here on Earth. In terms of like aging and disease processes, et cetera. So there's just a lot of value to be gained from understanding how we can adapt to this new environment.
All right, Erin, I know you're going to have a great answer. And we were just talking about Star Trek and space memes. I mean, you are literally going to be helping to contribute to that space exploration through Blue Origin.
Mm-hmm. And I think what Dr. Dorit was saying, actually, there's an intersection between that field and what designers do. I believe there was a chart released a few years ago by NASA that was listing the top risks to people doing deep space exploration. And up there was cosmic radiation, of course, but right after it was like interpersonal crew behavioral health with each other, how we work well together, and then personal mental health on deep space exploration. And that is where I'm starting to see designers join this field and help create new solutions so that people can not just achieve their mission goals, but live happy, healthy, productive, and meaningful lives in space or for space. So there isn't really much of a field of human-centered design for space yet, but there are a handful of practicing designers who are contributing just across the board for this deep space exploration problem space, but also for everyday, like the state of the industry as it currently is. And while I can't speak specifically to my current job, there's a really great example from another local Seattle company called Spaceflight Industries. A couple of years ago, they actually hired some user experience designers. And there was this problem statement that this might not be the exact wording that they had, but it's what I can see looking at the work that they've done, which is flying your payload to space should be as simple as booking a plane ticket is today. And they stood up an amazing platform with these UX designers they brought on board, where you can literally see all the flights that are available, because spaceflight is a third-party provider connecting customers with flights. And you can book your flight right there for your payload. You don't have to email a bunch of different companies and go through a lot of paperwork and have a lot of meetings. You can do it within minutes, essentially. And so to me, that is the value that my field is providing to the space industry, is it's that customer or user-centric thinking. It's really, in modern days, the difference between taxis and Uber or Blockbuster and Netflix. This is why you bring designers on board. People don't just want the functionality that space affords, they want the value adds. And so I think within this specific example of spaceflight, the value add was reduced cognitive workload and reduced time spent emailing providers. So we're seeing a lot of contributions from designers, both from human spaceflight and from a lot of context that we have today.
All right, and Jessica from NASA, one of the companies we know is definitely in the forefront of space exploration.
Yeah, thank you, Meredith. So I'll answer that sort of twofold, both from my previous role working as legal counsel for NASA and my current perspective. But you know, in-house legal counsel really helps provide move the industry forward by creating all of the contracts and working through all of the agreements that the agency has, both with our partners here in the U.S. and our agreements with our international partners. As we move forward, we're not moving forward just NASA alone. We're moving forward with our commercial partners and with our international partners. So I think that's a very important aspect of it. And in my current role in our Leg Affairs office, we work directly with the Hill in terms of providing information and feedback and having the discussions with our authorizing committee and with members of the Hill who are looking to understand and hopefully support our initiatives to help move human exploration forward.
That's such an exciting thing. And as we were talking about, women are at the forefront. And now we look where we were 10 to 20 years ago from where we were even the beginning of this year. Why is it important to each of you for women to be involved in space exploration and for this industry in general?
We just completed a diversity survey. And it was outstanding. We had an outstanding response from people of color. We were focused around, we did it for everybody, but we were really more focused on people of color and making sure that we had more representation in the space health research world from people of color. And we, throughout our demographics, we're seeing more and more women take part in our research. We have quite a number of female investigators in our Academy of Bioastronautics, our postdoc fellows, as well as our funded researchers. There's more women, but we saw, very few people of color. And so we recognized the problem in our current situation. We're no different than NASA and many other government agencies that are trying to, increase diversity across the board. But when we did the survey, it was really interesting. So people who are not in the majority, whether it be women in a room full of men in an aerospace or a space panel, or it's people of color in a room full of or white or non people of color or white people, they do feel differently, and they can't contribute in the same way, to the same extent. This is what we're hearing back from some of the responses that we got from this survey. And so we are missing a component of input when we don't have either women represented or people of color represented. So in other words, when you only have a very homogeneous sample size, as a biologist, I can tell you, if you're only looking at one type of subject when you're doing a biological study, you're not getting the full picture, and you're going to end up having a solution that doesn't work for everybody. And so when you try to make that square peg fit into the round hole in spaceflight, when lives are at stake or somebody has to perform to the best of their abilities, I'm sure Erin will understand completely about human factor design. If you're not including everybody's perspective, what may seem so obvious to a white man will not work well for a shorter woman. I'll give you one example. I think it was Eileen Collins. She was on a panel, and she was a fighter pilot. She's a NASA commander, a long duration astronaut. She was describing how when they wear their G suits in a plane to keep G forces from, causing them to pass out, that compresses the fluids in the body so that they don't lose enough blood in the head when they're pulling a lot of G forces. That compression suits were made only in small, medium, and large, were made for men. And they were really, really too large for women. And so it ended up compressing her chest. So that's a user factor, sort of human factor design problem. But when you don't include everybody in the conversation, you end up with solutions that can actually cause damage eventually or not be safe. So for me, it is absolutely essential to include as many voices as there are out there. So that's why it's not just about women, but diversity of everybody, because the solutions we come up with have to work for each individual appropriately.
That's such a good point to put out there. And I mean, I can tell you from my personal experience in my business, when I graduated from college a decade ago more, you just didn't have women that were in those power positions, and they did, but there was very few of them. And so I'm sure for Erin, you've noticed a difference too with your career field and why we need more women to be getting into this industry.
100%. All I can do is build off of all of what was just said is, especially in the design field, we recognize that people bring their biases to the table, both in the users or representative users that we get data from, and the stakeholders and the participants who are making decisions. And it's not necessarily about eliminating our biases, but recognizing them and bringing a lot of different biases and different lived experiences to the table. And so you're going to get so many different solutions and interventions and products if you bring a diversity of folks, and especially gender diversity, ethnicity, so many different lived experiences need to be at the table. And so I think, especially from what I'm seeing right now, I think we all kind of remember the infamous event that happened with, as the media spun it, there wasn't enough spacesuits for an all-woman spacewalk. And I think we recognize that was a much more complicated issue than just that. But it created a lot of great discussion around ergonomic design for women and the design of spacesuits. And beyond just the human factors considerations, I'm seeing designers really approach this also from socio-technical system considerations. I know designers who are thinking about the future of what I'll call housework in space, and that there's a lot of upkeep and maintenance that needs to happen in different space environments. And right here on Earth, we have discussions around women having an unfair amount of housework, and how do they design interventions that promote more equitable housework in space. So I'm seeing designers recognize the need to not just consider functional issues, but to bring a lot of diversity to the table, to consider more additional socio-technical issues as well.
That's great. And Jessica, we already brought this up at how you've noticed so many more women in power positions at NASA, but that's just going to start going up astronomically as we move forward, because we need more women to be in those positions to help contribute, as we've been discussing.
Yeah, and I think really at all levels. So from from the bottom to the top, really, I know our front office uses the slogan a lot that we're better together. And I really have to say I agree, and my co-panelists have touched on this a bit already. But there are so many ideas out there, and we at NASA have such ambitious and exciting goals moving forward. But to get there, we really need the best and the brightest. And the best and the brightest don't just come from, one race or one gender. We're spread out all over. And so we really need to encourage as many people to apply as possible, as many people to get into industry as possible, and as many folks moving up in the industry as possible. So yeah, I agree.
And I think our next question, this is a great segue. We go into talking about those people in the STEM fields that have inspired us. This is more of a later transition for me into more of doing space. And so I look at people like from NOAA and NASA, like Pam Sullivan, when I had the chance to interview her and talk about her role in the GOES Our Satellites series and what she was able to do, to when I interviewed Shannon Walker about what she was doing with science and space. So my next question for all of you goes on that same lines is, who was it that inspired you to go into that STEM field or STEM career? And how has it changed your life?
Okay, yeah, I'll take this one first. I was thinking about this last night and really have to call out and honor the memory of the late Dr. Robert Wingley, who was the head of the Washington NASA Space Grant Consortium for many, many years. He unfortunately passed away this past December, but he was the one who brought me into this field. I worked in his rockets and instrumentation lab for 5 years. And Robert was such a fierce advocate of bringing women, people of color, and people who came from non-traditional backgrounds that wouldn't really have access to STEM and STEM mentorship. He created a safe space for people to learn and to experiment, and he gave people a lot of autonomy, probably more autonomy than most professors would give undergrads, to pursue really challenging space projects. And so I absolutely owe a lot of where I am today due to him. And really, there's 2 important lessons that Robert imparted with me. And the first is always pay it forward and always make opportunities for those who wouldn't otherwise have them. And secondly, lean into really complex challenges that scare you and put you outside of your comfort zone. Space is not just a complicated system, it's a complex system because humans are involved and we have squishy emotions and so many other things. And that's scary, that's challenging, but lean into it because that's where the most important work is to be doing.
Well, thank you for that question. So many inspiring people along the way. I think the one that I would note was I did my undergrad at Cornell University, and I told you I've always had an interest in space, even though I didn't, I didn't see it as a career point. But we had a night lab, an astronomy night lab, and you had to be a high-level astronomy major to be able to take the class and be part of that night lab. But I just thought it was so cool and such a unique experience that I went and sought out the professor and asked, as a non-astronomy major, what could I do to get into your class and be able to go to this night lab? And so the professor enabled me to take the class as a pass-fail. And worked with me countless hours through office hours to get me up to speed as the only non-astronomy major in this high-level class. But it was just such a unique and wonderful experience to then, go on to working at NASA. So that was really special.
Well, for me, it started with a teacher in high school, and she was a bit weird, I have to say. Nobody liked her. She was very, very wacky, as a science teacher should be, maybe. But she was so passionate about biology that at the time, I think it infected me. And I thought, well, okay, this could be something really interesting. And so I think it starts with a really good teacher. It starts with somebody who gives you passion for discovery and curiosity about the world and makes you see possibilities. So I'm really grateful for her and her sort of inspiration for me.
Oh, those are all such great answers. I always hate this point where we get down to the final minutes because these women could talk for hours and we want to continue the conversation and we encourage it well after this. But there's always going to be that one piece of advice that you want people to take away. And so if you could each, Dorit, we'll start with you. What is the one piece of advice you would get to women that want to get into either a STEM field or into the space industry for their career?
Find a mentor. Find a mentor, and it doesn't have to be a woman, but find a mentor. And the way to do it is just build up the relationship slowly and pay it forward. I really like that, Erin. Paying it forward, not just to people who are less experienced than you, but also paying it forward towards people who are busy individuals. A prospective mentor, for example, people will send me papers or notifications of conferences, or they'll bring a piece of information forward that was useful to me. And so when people start to do that, you sort of build what's called capital with those individuals. And then when you do have an ask of them to mentor them, then you're much more likely, because you see that there's a bidirectional exchange of value between the two individuals. Because I don't consider myself at a higher level than anybody else. We are equals. When we're having a conversation, we are absolutely equals. It doesn't matter where you are in your career, and you have an opportunity to give to me just as much as I have to you. So if you're looking to break into a world of STEM or space, find a mentor and have that relationship with them.
I love it. How about you, Jessica?
I think that you really hit the nail on the head in noting that there's two differences there. There's getting into STEM fields and getting into space, which can be one and the same, but can also be two different things. So for me, I've never worked on the technical side of the house. I was a lawyer, and now I'm doing space policy. So for me, I didn't come from that traditional background, but found my way into this amazing community and this amazing world of space. So to keep in mind that there are non-traditional jobs, and we need all of them. We need people, all across the gamut of jobs that work in the space industry to help support and to promote the industry. For those looking to break in addition to the wonderful suggestion of mentorship, there are some organizations aimed at younger professionals. One of them is the Space Generation Advisory Council. I've worked with this group as legal counsel with them. I volunteered with them for a number of years. And there's other organizations as well, but there's organizations specifically targeted at young professionals to help you sort of break into the industry and find some of those mentorship opportunities, and also find your way into a number of the space conferences, which is a great place to be doing the networking and meeting all the folks that you need to then establish some of those mentorship relationships. So I piggyback on my predecessor.
That's great advice. And I know personally going to these space conferences, the difference that can make. All right, Erin, last but not least, how about for you?
Yeah, this is all such fantastic advice. I'm trying to think what I can add to it all. I completely agree, respect each other's peers and the unique things that people have to contribute. Mentorship is so important. Participating in conferences is so important. I guess what I would add is go find research or a problem statement within the space industry that lights a spark, that gets you out of bed in the morning, and go find people who want to champion that with you. And in addition to that, don't be afraid of taking risk and failing and having to go down really interesting paths of knowledge to achieve that goal and to solve that problem. I always say I'd rather hire somebody who has gotten C's in several classes, but then absolutely done an amazing research project somewhere else, rather than somebody who has done completely straight A's, fully recognizing that for many people, they can't actually afford to go get C's in several classes because of scholarships. But as much as you can, go take risks, go focus on important things, because the further you go in your career, the more you realize that class on wetland ecology or additive manufacturing ends up folding back into the work that you do in space. So yeah, I think that's what I would add to the conversation.
That's great. And I can tell you personally, I did get some C's in my classes in science, and I'm still a scientist. So just goes to show that if you're passionate about anything in your life, whether it's space or a STEM career, you can do it. What a great panel. Unfortunately, we have to wrap things up, but thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today for this fantastic celebration of World Space Week. You can find all of our information on the website if you want to reach out individually or with questions. But thank you to all three of these wonderful women, and thank you so much to the Space Foundation for having us and for letting our stories take flight.